Welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast, powered by BetUS and sponsored by William Mattar Law Offices. But first, our guys at Handsome Jack.
Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia Worldwide with Greg Thompson and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL.
Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening, Bills Mafia, and welcome to this edition of the Cover One Buffalo podcast. I am your host tonight, and we are Gregless here on the Cover One Buffalo podcast. But no worries, because I have this handsome fella right next to me, David Faux. David, how you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing pretty good. You know, it's Thanksgiving week, so I get to have a short work week. I get to enjoy a great meal plus football, and then have the day off the next day. It's kind of hard to beat that.
That's tough. And the Bills are playing football again. We all love that. And we get to talk about Bills football. As fun as it was to have a bye week here, especially coming off a big win against the Chiefs, that was fun to celebrate and kind of savor for a little while. But I missed the Bills over the week. I really did. I miss watching the Bills. And so it's good to have a game to get ready for here. And speaking of having a game to get ready for here, we have our guest, Rich Madrid, here to talk about the San Francisco 49ers. We'll pull him up here. Hey, Rich, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing all right here. We riding pretty high at 9-2, but I was saying here this week after watching the San Francisco game. So my dad's a Packers fan, so I definitely wanted to tune in. I know you do a lot of coverage of the Packers as well, so that was definitely probably a game for you to be definitely watching. And then with San Francisco coming up, I kind of got my notebook, sat down, watched that game to scout. After the way it went, though, one thing I really hate about the NFL, Rich, is facing a team that feels desperate for a win. And the Bills sitting at 9-2, I'm not saying they don't need to win, but it feels like San Francisco's flying back east here, really needing to walk out of Buffalo with a win. Is that kind of how the pulse of the fan base feels right now?
You know, after the Seattle game, it was kind of, they can still turn it around. They can still do this. They can still get a few more wins and maybe sneak in as a 6 or a 7. And then the way the week progressed before the Packers game, with Purdy going out, missing that game, Nick Bosa being out, no Charvarius Ward, CMC looks like 60% of what he used to be. And then going into Green Bay and just getting absolutely curb stomped. I don't think anybody really has any expectations at this point that they want to see the 49ers in the playoffs. If they get in, great. I think most fans are just really wanting to see a retool or a rebuild, let some of these older veteran type players go, and or maybe trade them or whatever, and then just look to rebuild for the next couple of years and see what they can get.
Yeah, and that's a tough spot to be. Obviously, you've had so much success over there in San Francisco, and then having kind of expectations fall flat from injuries. Really, I don't know that it's a lack of talent. It's just the getting a harsh taste of the injury bug this year. On that, obviously, we're here early in the week for those watching. This is recorded on Tuesday night. I know we're normally live on Wednesday, so Wednesday's usually when we get the first kind of look at an injury report. But are you seeing anything sort of changing in that injury report? I know there was a weird Schefter tweet at the end of the week of like, well, Purdy is hurt, but maybe he'll play, but maybe he won't. And then obviously Bills fans would want to know about Bosa and seeing how that would be trending. And obviously, how McCaffrey is recovering now. What is it, 3 games into coming back?
Yeah, and I mean he looked noticeably better the last game than he did the first 2 back. Just probably trying to get back in a little bit of game shape. I'm sure he's not 100% with the issues he was dealing with both of his Achilles. But as far as injury reports after the game, I think Aaron Banks got evaluated for a concussion. Dominic Pooney is being evaluated for a shoulder injury. Diamador Lenore knee injury from early in the first quarter of that game. So just more names keep piling up on the injury list to go on top of what they already are missing. I have no clue about Bosa. I don't know. I think he's probably going to miss the next couple of games.
Yeah.
And even Kittle, who's their most reliable target outside of Jawan Jennings, is dealing with the hamstring issue all season, so he's not even 100%. So just the toll of the last several years, I think these guys are finally just not winning the two Super Bowls, and
It's a lot of games to play.
so
Yeah.
it's a lot of games to play to miss out on the big one twice in the playoffs. I think they've played 13 playoff games since 2019 or something crazy.
Yeah.
So it's just not ideal. So there more names keep popping up. I'm sure we'll see more tomorrow, and as we get the statuses for the first day of practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky. So I think we're good to just jump into some of the questions that we have about the Niners, and I'll start things off with their defense. So I mean, obviously going to the Super Bowl last year, there was a contentious relationship between the previous defense coordinator Steve Wilks and the rest of this team, or at least the rest of the coaching staff, and then they just part ways after they get to a Super Bowl, and then they promote Nick Sorensen, who's been there for a few years. They bring in Brandon Staley after he got fired from the Chargers to, I guess, be this defensive assistant. So what changes have been made from Steve Wilks to this Nick Sorensen defense? Has it been better? Has it been worse? Has it been anything majorly significant between the two?
I guess just on paper, it's and maybe even on film too, just because of all the people they're missing, it's worse technically. But they really went back to a little more of their, the single highs or early Seattle scheme that Shanahan wanted to run when he first took over. With tweaks here and there, obviously, they play a lot more like split safety coverages, quarters, cover 2, cover 6. They've incorporated a lot more of that over the last several seasons. And under Wilks, they were really more of a blitzing defense. They had trouble generating pressure with the front four, like the same kind of pressure that they could generate under Saleh and D'Amico Ryans. They couldn't do it with Wilks, so they had to try to bring it from other areas. And they've really gone back to that with Nick Sorensen. Everyone kind of felt, or maybe a few, myself and a few others that covered them felt that they underachieved with Wilks. Like they had all that talent. They were kind of, they helped, they had those 2 playoff games against the Packers and the Lions that were really kind of up and down from a defensive perspective. And in the offense for sure didn't help in those games early on, but in the Super Bowl, you find this relationship of coverages and man coverage and being able to kind of erase all the reads for Mahomes, and you play that for 3.5 quarters, and then all of a sudden you switch up what's working, and you see the result in overtime where Shanahan blows up and calls a timeout because they were lined up in cover 0 again and ended up getting burned. So just things like that, like just underachieving with Wilks and all that talent to go into Sorensen, who, by the way, they set up for failure from the start. They let Armstead go. They let, Greenlaw's been hurt. Hufanga's hurt again. That's another name I forgot about. And they bring in all these kind of just guys who might fit like a more of a Staley type defense or more of a Fangio style defense. Yeah. And they're not productive. Leonard Floyd hasn't been productive. Shocker. He's not playing next to Aaron Donald anymore. He's not racking up, cleanup sacks for you guys. He just hasn't produced, even playing with Bosa, just not at the level that you would have thought when they signed him. Malik Collins and I can't even, there's so many names that have shuffled through there. They're just not living up to the expectations. Gross Matos, same thing. Another, 3-4 type edge rusher, outside linebacker, he's been hurt. So there's just no depth or talent there outside of Bosa. Javon Hargrave got hurt against the Rams in week 3, and he's been out ever since, and there's no chance he's coming back. So, and then they signed Devondre Campbell from the Packers, another kind of a guy who had one good season in Green Bay, got paid and fell off a cliff. So, just not good all around, and then you add in the rookies who God bless them, they're earning their stripes and they're playing really well, but they're not able to kind of make up for the mistakes on the front end, and then they make mistakes on the back end. So it's just a perfect storm of just talent discrepancy and maybe, a wet behind the ears, defensive coordinator who's never done this. He's always been an assistant. So there's a steep learning curve for all of them right now. And I don't really expect much of that to change.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up sort of how that Super Bowl played out and how they had done a good job through 3 quarters, and then getting into the fourth quarter is when it started to come apart. And this has kind of been an issue for them this season as well. I mean, you look at weeks 3 and 5, they gave up leads in the fourth quarter. They struggle in the fourth quarter in like week 6 and week 8 and week 10. And then in week 11, they give up another big lead. So what's working in those 3 quarters that's not happening in the fourth quarter? Is it just like this lack of pass rush that's not sustaining through that time? Is there coverage issues? Like something's happening in the fourth quarter here.
Yeah, it's just a lack of generating pressure. In years like even last year, they were, the offense was able to score, 21, 28 points by the third quarter and to make the opposing offense one-dimensional. It's easier for a defense when you know that you're just going to be facing nothing but the pass, and you can kind of pin your ears and get after them a little bit more. When games are close, and this is the case last year, when games are close, they can't generate any kind of pass rush. They often find themselves out-gapped in the run just because of the way they structure some of their base first down coverages with the fronts. So it's a lot of give and take in that regard. Like their defense, I think that they have spent the last few years building to get lighter because they knew that they would be facing offenses that were in a deficit, and they could have lighter guys get after the quarterback and beat some of these heavier offensive lines. But those defenses can't sustain a 17-14 game in the fourth quarter or something, because eventually you're just going to wear them down. And that's what's been happening. They can't get pressure late. They have issues facing what we call, trips, bunch, 3-by-1 formations. And they often play. This is the one area that Wilkes actually excelled with them. And this year they're playing it the old way, where you play straight up man no matter who you're covering. You don't banjo the coverage. You don't pass guys off. You don't take first in, first out, things like that. And so you're finding, like, if you watch a few of the plays on the Rams game early on or the Vikings game from those early weeks, you see them just being picked apart by these formations, especially late in games and high leverage situations. And so haven't been able to compensate for any of that on the front end. So it is a lot of they can hold them for 3 quarters, but the fourth quarter, the offenses find ways to pick them apart. And some of that goes to the offense just not scoring too. So it goes hand in hand.
Right. And you making a point about them playing a lot more of that, like just straight man coverage. I mean, I think of Joe Brady and this offense and them running like mesh really, really well and really, really consistently. Yeah. And I think that's just like a perfect storm for this situation. Yeah.
Yeah. He really loves that mesh traffic play with Cook.
And they do it well too. One of the bright spots, I suppose, for this defense, though, has been the aforementioned Diamador Lenore, who was a 5th-round pick a couple of years ago and then got paid during the season. I mean, they gave him not even just like a nice little extension. This was like 5 years, $90+ million. This was like top of the market type of money for this guy. So where has he improved throughout his time with this team? Because he was drafted in 2021, which I believe was when Robert Saleh was still there, or was that
that was D'Amico's first year? Yeah, that was first year of D'Amico.
Yeah. So, obviously having a couple different coordinators that he's been under. So what's changed since that time, and how has that sort of changed the dynamic of the defense on the back end?
Well, he's a really good. He can play outside corner. He can play nickel. Last year and this year, like this year primarily, he's been playing nickel because they have a little bit more reliable, or they had a little bit more reliable corner depth over there. They've got one of the rookies, Renardo Green, starting at corner, and they brought in Isaac Yadam, so it kind of took a little bit of the pressure off him to play inside and outside like he did all last year, because the nickel position for them was really unreliable last year with they brought in. He was terrible, but I'm really bad with some names. If they're not there for longer than a year. So he bounced, like when they were in base last year, he would bounce out the corner. When they were in nickel or dime, he would bounce inside to nickel. So just a little bit more reliability at nickel. He can fit the run really well. He's a really good run defender. He covers really well. But last couple of games since he got paid, it's like night and day different with him, and he's not like playing up to that level of the contract that he just got. So even then, it's kind of been a bummer to see that. But corner defensive back play comes in waves. Like the guys get into a slump, and they're in a slump for a little while until they gain the confidence and get back out of it. One of the guys on our end, Eric Crocker, talks about that a lot with defensive backs and kind of getting in their head and finding the right mindset. Because when a corner gets into the slump that Lenore's in the last couple of games, it can be hard for them to dig back out of it.
Yeah, for sure.
And Eric Crocker is a great follow on Twitter as well.
Great resource
for those who have seen.
Yeah, I'm a big defensive back guy, and one of the best follows. It's a difficult position, I think, for the average fan to understand, because you don't always see in the broadcast, right? I know you watch a lot of All 22, so you don't always see the broadcast of what's happening, and then you see a reception given up, and everyone's like, "Oh, they're getting targeted," but you really don't know what the coverage is. You don't really know what's going to happen in deep down the field. So he does a great job kind of explaining that. Let's dig into this offense a little bit, because getting into this matchup, this is super hard for me. One, I don't know that we've seen exactly what this offense should be because of injuries, right? Like McCaffrey hasn't been around. He's just getting back. Obviously, Jordan Mason filled in very nicely for him, but Ayuk goes out. And even when he was healthy, wasn't probably playing to the full potential of what we've seen Ayuk be in this offense. Kittle has been playing well considering dealing with that nagging injury all year, but this is not the explosive San Francisco offense that we've been used to seeing in the Kyle Shanahan era. Is it just all injuries, or do you think maybe some teams are kind of starting to get a little into what Kyle Shanahan's wanted to do with more of his coaching tree being present in the league, and everybody's seeing a little bit more of these offenses on a regular basis? Is it the league kind of catching up with it, or is it simply we can write this off that it's due to mostly injury?
There's never really one root cause in all of this. I think some of it is defenses catching up to what they want to do. Some of it is knowing that McCaffrey's not there, so you're not going to get a varied run game. They're kind of been talking about this for the last couple of weeks. On my end, they're more of like a one-dimensional running team now. In that they run primarily outside zone, and if it's not 2016, Kyle doesn't want to run outside zone as his predominant base run anymore. Like they've especially since McCaffrey, they've switched it up to more of a gap scheme, maybe 40% of the time, and outside zone maybe 55-60% of the time. Now they're like 85% back to outside zone. So it's easier for defenses, like when you're going to get a heavy dose of outside zone, you just load up the box. You take away the edges, and you don't let anything get outside of you. And then they're not really running play action a lot, which I think is probably one of the flaws that Shanahan has right now. Like, you have your quarterback who's missing most of his weapons. You don't have McCaffrey. You kind of need to get back to more of like a basic, kind of grind them down offense with play action. And they don't really even run that anymore. They've kind of gotten away from that the last several years too. So I think, and I think Shanahan knew this coming in with McCaffrey's potential absence, and that they probably spent a lot more time running outside zone again in camp and in summer and in the spring, because McCaffrey missed all of the spring practices too. They just, and you could see that early on, like first 5 weeks, they were killing teams with Mason.
Yeah.
And then since the Cardinals game, the Seahawks that week, it's kind of fallen off a cliff. So I think teams, Mike McDonald's caught on. He always gives these offenses a hard time. And then the rest of the teams they face, the Chiefs obviously in there, give them a hard time. They set the edge really well. They don't let you get outside. And it's just cascaded from there. The Packers did not care about giving up in the middle runs. They were going to stop the outside, and that's exactly what they did. So I think teams know, like, you're not going to get gap schemed to death. You're not going to get countered, powered to death. 49ers are going to try to get to the edge, and they're not doing it. And part of that is, the offensive line missing a lot of blocks. They're just not playing up to their level. And part of it is the Garendo and Mason are not, Isaac Garendo, the rookie, and Mason, they're not gap scheme runners. They're zone runners. Their EPA per play or per rush on gap scheme is abysmal this year. Those two they're not patient runners. They're zone guys.
Yeah, you nailed it on the stack box. They face it 45% of the time. That's third most right now in the NFL. They still have a decent success rate against that. But I do want to talk about, because it is a weird sort of thing when I watch, especially going earlier in the season. I think you kind of alluded to it in that in camp they're running more of the zone stuff. And the backs are a little bit better for zone. And I think the offensive line probably got in the rhythm of playing that, because the offensive line actually had some real nice success early on. And the data points to that too. DVOA has them as third adjusted line yards, fourth in running back yards. But I think that's heavily weighted in that Jordan Mason part of the season, where now I think in getting McCaffrey back, you're trying to do more of what Shanahan really wants to do, but your line's kind of been in the rhythm of blocking a certain way. And that kind of is a counterintuitive thing. But overall, this line's been pretty good. Again, also eighth in sacks given up. They've done a pretty good job. But is this becoming something that's kind of a weird thing of they're trying to force McCaffrey back? I know a lot of fantasy owners are sitting there kind of saying, where's Jordan Mason?
Yeah.
He had so much success for us. And then McCaffrey comes back and takes on really the workload right away when he came back. What was it, 19 carries right out of the gate in the first game? Are they trying to kind of force what they knew worked for them in a desperation to try to get back and ahead of this division? And should they go back to what was working a little earlier on?
Yeah, this is a point of contention for a lot of 49ers content creators on my end too, is that, they're kind of pinning all of the recent failures on not playing Mason more. And I don't think that's accurate. I mean, I understand why Kyle goes back to McCaffrey right away, right? Because I don't think what a lot of fans take into account is that, Mason gets all these yards, but when you see the yards coming, it's usually because the offensive line is parting the sea for him.
Mm-hmm.
When things are compressed and he has to hit a crease, he often does not see it. In his last 4 touches, and this includes special teams, he's fumbled twice. He fumbled one against the Seahawks, I think. He fumbled against the Packers and lost it. He's had 4 fumbles this year already. Garendo has given up 2 really bad sacks in pass protection.
Yeah, it's tough.
And so, it's hard to when McCaffrey's your reliable pass protecting back and has been your reliable workhorse, it's understandable to want to go back to him and give him
was an MVP candidate just last year.
Yeah. And so and from that standpoint, I get it. Like you're 5-5, you get McCaffrey back. Or what were they, 4-5 or before they? I don't remember. But you get to 5-5, you get McCaffrey back, and you're thinking, well, I've got a chance now. This division's wide open, and so why wouldn't you? And now maybe they're at a point where the only argument I could see for maybe giving Mason more reps now is to just kind of shut McCaffrey down a little bit and give him some more rest, and if they've written off this part of the season, who knows? But that would be the only argument to give Mason more reps, is to just give him a rest. Outside of that, I wouldn't want to be taking my best players off the field.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that will probably depend on the health of Brock Purdy here coming in. And that's probably the most difficult thing of going into this matchup is the unknown of whether Purdy plays, because I think it's a totally different offense, whether if it's going to be Purdy or if it's going to be Allen, or I don't even know if Dobbs would be a consideration with how poorly Allen played. But the offense doesn't operate the same when it's not Brock Purdy back there. And I think that Purdy has done himself a huge favor in being injured and showing how actually bad that it gets when he's not in there, making himself super valuable to the Shanahan offense. I know you said you didn't have really any insight, but how are you guys sort of dissecting that going forward of like, you're not far out of the playoffs. This division is still within grasp. It seems like that the NFC West, nobody really wants to run away and win this division right now. And so I can see a scenario where, the coaches and players are probably still in play for the division, but if Brock Purdy can't go, that feels like maybe it is out of reach, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much in reach it was with Purdy healthy and playing either. I mean, even for him, like the whole thing with him last year about being an MVP candidate, and is he a product of the offense? Is he not? Is he whatever?
Sure.
I have my own thoughts about him. I don't really, this year, what I've seen this year, like even with games that they've had a chance to put away and he's had a chance to lead a drive, he hasn't gotten it done. So they're in a situation now where, like, yeah, you see what it's like with the backups. We've seen this with Shanahan and the 49ers and backups, playing Nick Mullins, CJ Beathard coming in. Brock Purdy was a third stringer when he took over, elevated to second string. So they're no stranger to this and knowing what it's like. The question becomes like, okay, yeah, we know what it's like, and they definitely need him back. And I think he's a good quarterback. I don't think he's necessarily a top 10 guy, but he's a guy, but the NFL right now, there's so many quarterbacks you can win games with. I don't think it's kind of unprecedented this era, but
yeah,
you're looking at, do you pay this guy 60 mil versus 35 or 40 mil? Like, if he comes back and he plays well, he plays decent, they're probably going to pay him. If he comes back and doesn't play well, then you don't have to pay him next year. You don't have to pay him in the offseason. You can wait. You can tag him, things like that. And I think so much of that is up in the air now with his injury and being out. And I don't think he's going to play versus Buffalo. So I don't.
Gotcha.
I think the injury is worse than they're letting on at this point. And I think they do this thing where they try to find ways around it to see if they can play. Like they did this with Garoppolo when he had a shoulder and a wrist injury I think it was the 2021 season.
Mm-hmm.
And he grinded through the last two games in the playoffs and with a brace on his throwing hand and on his shoulder. So, I think it's a little worse than they're letting on at this point. And the fact that they keep going back and forth with these weird comments says as much. There's really no point in, hiding who's going to start versus Buffalo. I mean,
sure.
It's not, I don't know. I don't think it's all positive right now for them.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll find out tomorrow here once, again, Wednesday's practice comes out and we start to see these injury reports. Again, doing the show on a Tuesday, different than our Wednesday show where we get those. But before we get you out of here, we'd love to get a score prediction from all the guests that come on. This is our friends at BetUS. They have it as a -7 for the Bills, which is that's about what I've seen here all week. I saw it about 6.5. They've got it at -7 with a 44.5 total. What is your prediction for this game in Western New York here on Sunday Night Football?
I would bet Bills -7 all day.
Yeah.
I think it, if whoever plays quarterback, it's going to be tough because, it's hard to throw in that weather. And I thought, isn't it supposed to snow or something?
The weather's pretty wacky right here. I'm paying attention to it, and we've got whether or not it's going to snow. It's probably going to be in the 20s, maybe even colder at night. Over the weekend, we're getting an Arctic blast coming through, so it's going to be a cold one. It's probably going to be windy, and there is some projection. This lake effect snow is pretty unpredictable, so it could be here for the game. It could be before the game, maybe a little after. We won't know until we get a little closer, but there is setting up for a big snowstorm here over the weekend.
Now, and that's the weird thing about the 49ers, right? Like they can show they can go into Green Bay and win in a sub-zero game. They've done that a couple of times. but I don't know. There's too many. They have too many things stacked against them. If you need like if I was giving a score prediction, I'd probably go somewhere in the area of maybe like 24-10. Just weather affects all teams. It doesn't matter who the quarterbacks are. I just think it'll affect the 49ers a little more, just being that they don't really have a quarterback who can probably throw through the elements.
Yeah.
And then when you're one dimensional, it's tougher to score in the snow. So yeah, I wouldn't expect more than probably a 10-point output from the 49ers again. So yeah, probably 24-10.
Well, if people listening like what you're saying on that, you can use promo code YouTube150, get deposit matched up to $2,000, get 150% bonus on your first deposit and 125 on your second and third deposits. Again, powered by BetUS here. If you like that bet that Rich is saying, I don't disagree with you. I think my score prediction is going to be pretty close to that when we do ours here, man. But tell the people what you've got going on here, where they can find you, and what kind of work to expect.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Rich J Madrid. Mostly just tweeting about or I guess commenting. Now is it called? I don't know.
Posting.
So whatever.
I call it
on
tweeting.
X
It's Twitter, and I
Twitter,
tweet. I'll never stop.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, but yeah, same handle there, same handle on Blue Sky or whatever that is.
Yep.
Covering the Packers primarily. The 49ers obviously is the team I'm a fan of. I write a Substack on them weekly called westcoastfootball.substack.com. And then Football Zebras, we have a live blog of officiating rules and calls on Sundays at footballzebras.com. So doing that. So pretty busy Sundays.
Awesome.
In between all the live game stuff. So yeah, that's where you can find me. And the Packers stuff is at SB Nation, the Packers site there, Acme Packing Company.
Awesome. I'll have to, like I said, my dad's a big Packer fan, so I'll have to make sure that he's following along and getting some good content from you, man. So hey,
yeah, we've got a couple of good film guys there now, so it's
he'll
great.
love that. Yeah, that's perfect. Awesome, man. Well, hey, thanks for coming on, talking to us. I hope you have a great Thanksgiving, and I hope both teams have
you too. You guys
healthy
as well.
weekend here.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, you too.
All right, take care.
I'll see you guys online. All right, you too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, man. Take care.
Bye.
All right, David. This one's a weird one. We were talking about it a little bit offline of like, if you got these next 6 games, I think the Bills got to go at least 4-2, right, in this stretch of games here. Ideally 5-1, and get yourself a real chance, I think, to really make a run at the 1 seed. You'd have to probably go 5-1. I don't know. KC's going to drop 2. That might be wish casting a little bit, but the way KC looked this past weekend going toe to toe with Carolina, I guess anything's possible here coming up. They got some tough ones, but this one's a weird one because like I don't know if I totally agree with Rich. I think all NFL teams, like nobody's packing it up, and I do think that division is super tight, and 49ers do have enough talent. If they can get just healthy enough, they could make a run at their division still and get a playoff spot. And that's going to matter to everybody in that locker room. Like, I feel like they're desperate for a win. No?
Well, I would agree with that. I think that the problem with the Niners, and this was something that Uber and I talked about on our show, which is just that coming into this season, the vibes were bad. Like it was just, they had such, between the Brandon Ayuk situation and that being so contentious and so public, and they're going to trade him and they're not going to trade him, and it's definitely going to the Steelers, and now just back and forth the whole time, and then he finally gets on the field. They give him the money. He's on the field, doesn't produce much, and then he gets hurt and it's done for the year. So it's just everything about, and that's not even including Christian McCaffrey having this Achilles tendonitis, and then just a weird injury. And then once you go into, I'm getting a second opinion from a doctor in a different country, that's like, ooh, this is getting bad. Like this is rough territory.
I think fantasy owners wanted to sue Shanahan and the 49ers, like a class action lawsuit for everyone that drafted McCaffrey, right?
Yeah,
like, you had to have known that it was like it was more serious. Yeah. Um,
He's always very cagey about injuries, but also weird. And sometimes it's like, yeah, I don't know if Brock Purdy is going to play against Buffalo. And it's like, okay, we were asking about Green Bay, but thanks for letting us know about that too.
yeah,
But I mean,
it's
so yes, there is this sense of desperation, I think, and especially because that NFC West division is so tight right now. Yes, they I think logically they know that there is still a shot there,
yeah.
and like a really good shot too. But are they going to be able to kind of overcome everything else that's going on right now for them? I don't think so. And I
No.
understand the whole like you're backed into a corner. This is probably your last like solid shot to get yourself back into it. But it's just hard. And I think especially being on the road in not great weather conditions, and especially for the Bills who under Sean McDermott are undefeated coming off a
Yep.
bye week.
You got to
I
stop
just
saying
think
that though.
this
We're
is
gonna
a
jinx them. We can't keep bringing that up. We're gonna jinx them.
but let's pump the brakes on the jinxes here. All right, let's
Yeah, yeah.
not.
We're jinx proof, right?
It's just no, but I don't see a scenario, realistically speaking,
Yeah.
where the Niners are going to come into Buffalo and leave with an actual victory here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be tough. And it was really tough because the physical type of game that they really did get pounded on in Green Bay, and then you have to fly back to San Francisco, lick your wounds, and then fly back to Buffalo, a big trip out back out east. That's a tough meat of your schedule, playing against two of the hottest teams right now in football in Green Bay and Buffalo back to back, tough
Yeah.
weather conditions. So not shaping up great here for the 49ers. But the Bill, we talked a lot about the health of the 49ers here. And something that I want to bring up here, I'm going to do a little bit of a segment here for our friends at William Mattar Law Offices. We've done this one a few times. We've talked about this here now for months. Matt Milano will be returning at some point in the near future. I do think so this is a here to help, but I'm also going to pump the brakes a little bit for our friends at William Mattar Law Offices, because he is coming back here right at some point, assuming nothing has gone wrong over the weekend. His 21-day window, I think, started on November 11th, so that puts him at December 4th for him to be activated to the 53-man roster. I think a lot of content creators and people assume that actually could happen. Again, Wednesday practice is tomorrow morning here, or it will be today when you're listening to it. We won't know if he is active for that practice, but a lot of people are kind of assuming that he is going to be activated within this week. I am pumping the brakes on that. I don't think the Bills have any urgency to rush him coming back before they have to do it. I could see this being something they play out till that last day or into next week, where they get him going for next week. Dorian Williams has actually played really well in this defense. The defense is playing well. Matt Milano hasn't played a real NFL game in 413 days now. I think it'll be like 420 something days by the time he actually comes in and plays a game, if it goes the way that I believe it does. So for me, it feels like, one, we know the Bills have been pretty conservative with a lot of injuries. They got bit a little bit by not being conservative with Von Miller's return and allowing him to come back a little early. But I think they're going to lean a little conservative. They've got 6 games here, so it doesn't feel like a huge rush where you could miss this game, have him come back on a limited snap count over the next couple of games, and then you have a 3-game stretch of division games where you could ramp him up for usage into the playoffs. But I also want to pump the brakes on, again, this guy hasn't played in over 400 days. We haven't seen him. And I think a lot of people are expecting Matt Milano to come back and beat Matt Milano, the Matt Milano that we saw the last time we saw him before that Jacksonville injury, and that he's just going to plop right in next to Terrell Bernard, and we're going to have a couple of all pros, and the defense is going to be unstoppable. And I don't know that that's the case, David. I would love that to happen. I want to be so wrong on this. I want him to come back tomorrow, and I want him to be, I wanted to plop in. It's everything that I've ever wanted, but everything inside of me is telling me I think it's going to be conservative, and I think it's going to take him some time to get back to the guy that we know him to be, just getting into football shape. Look at what's happening with McCaffrey, right?
Yeah. And the other thing, I mean, it's, you kind of nailed it, at least to me. It's just the idea that the Bills do tend to take their time when it comes to injuries. And given the fact that this defense is still playing fairly well throughout this season, and in particular, Dorian Williams. I mean, yes, Dorian Williams has his limitations, and we knew that about him.
Yeah.
But given his limitations, he's still playing well at filling in for this role. It helps when the two starting safeties are tackling as well as they are and doing the things that they normally do in this Sean McDermott, now Bobby Babich style of defense. And obviously Taron Johnson being who he is and being super physical against the run and being able to come up and act as that extra linebacker while still having the requisite coverage skills that you need from a nickel. Like, this allows you the flexibility to kind of bring Milano in however you want. And maybe he's activated for this game and they keep him on a real low pitch count, right?
Yeah.
But maybe he's not. And that's fine. But I don't, what I don't want, and this is the point of the pump the brake segment, is for people to freak out however this plays out. Whether he's active and then, people freak out because he's not playing as much. Oh, did they rush him back too early? It's like, no, this is probably just part of what they want to do. Or if he's not active and they're like, oh, what's he going to do? Is he actually going to come back? What are they? Blah, 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 blah. It's like whatever happens is going to happen. This team and this defense has been fine throughout the season without Matt Milano. Getting Matt Milano back for the playoffs is what's important. That's what they need to be focused on. The stretch of games against a couple of NFC opponents and then the rest of this god-awful AFC East division, right? Like Patriots, Jets, Patriots. Do you need Matt Milano for that? Probably not. It would be nice because, you get to take advantage of some really bad teams right there, but it's not necessary to beat those teams because the Bills have won 9 games without Matt Milano, and the defense has been pretty good without Matt Milano. Adding Matt Milano is a bonus, and I would love to have that bonus, but it's a bonus nonetheless.
Yeah, and I think I do think he will, even if it takes a little bit of time for him to get back to the physical skills that we're used to seeing from him. Again, I think he's fully recovered from the lower body injury, right? And he had this upper body injury, and that's probably a little bit easier to come back in season 4, but not playing NFL in-season football games for, again, 400 days now, almost 2 full seasons, not really playing. That is going to be something that takes a little bit of time. So again, he has to be activated to the roster by December 4th. So it doesn't have to happen before this game. It could happen after this game here, which is something that it feels like a Billsy thing to me, to them to ride it out until next week, until they have to activate him. Also, I know they have that roster spot sitting there waiting for him. So who knows? Sean McDermott did say they had no new injuries coming out of the Chiefs game, and that all the people were going to be there rehabbing that needed to rehab to get back. There's a couple other names that I think people are looking forward to getting back. So we'll see. Maybe Matt Milano really checked all the boxes and the training staff feels good. And as long as they feel good, I think he'll be active. But again, once he's active, I could see them limiting that pitch count and bringing him back slowly. And it would be nice, though, to have him back at least for 4 or so games heading into the playoffs, to your point, even if it's just showing. I hate any scenario that takes Taron Johnson off the field. But even some like red zone type things where you do want to go 3 linebackers, to be able to see Dorian and Bernard, that would be cool. I'd like to see him get some of the in the mix on some of that stuff. But even if he's not physically what we have seen in the past or expect to see from him, I do think his processing will be something that matters, and his ability to dissect what the offense is doing matched with Terrell Bernard. That could be something that could really reap some benefits into the postseason. So I'm not trying to say I'm not excited about the return of Matt Milano. I'm very excited. I love him as a player, but I do want to pump the brakes on how quickly it'll come back and how quickly he'll be super impactful here in this season. So again, that's our friends at William Mattar Law Offices. Hurt in a car, call William Mattar. You know it. 444-4444. Everybody knows William Mattar and the number, the best commercials in all of Western New York. And so that's that, man. David, this is the part of the show where we have to put ourselves on the spot. Again, I'm going to pull it up from our friends at BetUS. The show is powered by BetUS. Again, use promo code YouTube150. get deposits match up to $2,000, get $150 bonus on your first deposit, and $125 on your second and third deposits. I'm putting you on the spot. You're filling in for Greg. I think it was Greg's turn to go first.
Sure.
What's your prediction for this one, my friend?
So I think that there's a valid reason to maybe be concerned about this being sort of a cornered animal type of game, right? This is their last chance to try and get even with their record, to push this division and keep this division on its heels essentially, and try to right the ship a bit. But this kind of gives me the same vibes as 2020 when the Bills played the Niners in Arizona. And people were like, hey, maybe this is sort of a rallying point for them. And maybe they can, because this is a dangerous team and they've got plenty of players. And then the Bills beat them 34-24. So I think this is probably not dissimilar. I'm probably going to go with like a 31-17 score here.
Okay. I don't hate that. For me, I know there's been a lot of talk about Sean McDermott being undefeated out of the bye. I agree. I think he's good out of the bye, but the team doesn't always play great out of the bye. They win the game, right? But it's not, it takes a little bit of time. It's a little sloppy coming out of the bye. With weather, I know I believe Josh Allen's weatherproof. I'm not scared of playing him in weather. I think that a lot of people will harken back to that Patriots game, and I think if they would have had the testicular fortitude to throw the ball earlier, because once they did throw the ball, Josh proved he could throw through the wind. If they would have done it earlier, it wouldn't even been a contest. I think he can play in the weather, but I think it'll take some time. The weather will be a little sloppy. It might be a sloppy game to start out. But I don't think I don't think Purdy's going to play. And if that is the case, I think they're going to struggle. I could see San Francisco getting some big runs. Again, I think the Bills defense is good against the run, but they are susceptible to some of the explosive type runs. So I could see some of those leaking out and being annoying and then putting together a couple scoring drives. But I've got this one 24-13 Bills. Again, the only reason I didn't put this as a 30-point plus game for the Bills, which they've been racking up 30 points on offense, is coming out of the bye. I could see them being a little sloppier than we've been seeing over the past 3-4 weeks here. And that just limits maybe some of the possessions, some of the points, but they still get it done. I think the Bills will get it done here this weekend. And also, I'll even go a step further with my hot take. I think right now, last I saw, Miami was or Green Bay was a 3.5-point favorite to beat the Dolphins. I think Thursday, Green Bay takes care of business. And I think Sunday night, the Buffalo Bills take care of business. I think the Bills are 5-time in a row AFC East champions this weekend. Is that too hot? Is that too homerish?
I don't think that's too high. I think that, especially the way that Green Bay played in that last game against San Francisco and the way that they're able to run the ball with Josh Jacobs, right? Like Miami's kind of doing well offensively in particular. The defense has some moments here and there. Like Jalen Ramsey is still a great player, and Javon Holland, when he's healthy, is a great player. And even Chop Robinson is coming along lately. But I think that when Green Bay is hot, they are very difficult to stop. And we're getting to the point of the year where Matt LaFleur just starts cooking. Like he's awesome. His record in December is unbelievable. And we're right at that point right now. So I think that
and the Dolphins,
this
is the point where the Dolphins start to collapse no matter how good they are, right? I do think the Dolphins are finally playing to the level that people anticipated the Dolphins would look like, right? Like that Tua injury obviously threw a cog in who they were supposed to be this year, having him out for a month, put them behind the ball, and now they're trying to catch up. But traditionally, you get into December. Obviously, we saw it last year. I was just on the radio with Roger LaFleur in Toronto, and we were talking like, he's like, are the Bills going to, keep their foot on the gas? And I was like, they ought to, because they saw firsthand last year. We were talking about being in the hunt this time last year, and Miami was way out in front, and Miami totally lost it in the second half of the season. But that is something that they've kind of done over the last few years. And so it does feel like it's shaping up where LaFleur and the Green Bay Packers playing well, looking pretty hot, and Miami is looking hot. But this has traditionally been a time of year where they have to travel to cold weather. It's not going to be great for them. I think the Bills get it done and get that 5th AFC East title in a row. And that's cool. we lived through the drought. Like I
Listen,
know I know there'll be mentions in here of like, oh, that doesn't matter. They got to win a Super Bowl, dude. But I'm gonna enjoy every single one of those. I've lived in New England through all the AFC East
mhm.
champions from the New England Patriots. I'm gonna enjoy every single one, whether they win a Super Bowl or not. These are still gonna be fun for me in the moment.
Listen, like the fact that in a year where almost everyone was picking someone else other than the Bills to win this division, and we're at a point where they can clinch this division on December 1st is
Yeah,
absolutely insane. It's a testament to how good this team actually is, how good Josh Allen is, how good Sean McDermott is as a coach.
yeah.
Like this is just a crazy thing to be able to be this good, this consistent, this strong year in and year out. And especially, there's a large part of me that is experiencing a level of Schadenfreude that I didn't think was possible watching the Jets just utterly fall apart
It's so fun.
because I mean, I don't want to spend time talking about the Jets, but like there's just something about the fact that I mean, even on our show, Uber and I were both like, is there a chance this falls apart? Of course. Will it? Probably not. I mean, this is a talented team and they've got a good coaching staff.
Yeah.
They'll probably end up with a winning record and maybe a playoff spot. And now we're sitting here and it's like, this is literally the worst case scenario for this team. And I didn't think it was actually going to happen. And it has. And it's just kind of like, what are you going to do, man? This
It's
is,
super enjoyable.
sucks to suck. I mean,
Yeah. Sucks for you guys. I'm
Sorry.
enjoying every bit of that. So David, I appreciate you coming out, giving us your time here. Tell the people if they
Mhm.
don't know, they should know where to follow you, what work you and Uber have coming up. If people aren't watching, they should be. It's a great show. I love you guys, good chemistry. But tell the people what you guys got going.
So you can follow me at DFAUXY or at DFoxy on Twitter. If you're on Blue Sky, I am on Blue Sky. I need to get better about actually posting to Blue Sky. So maybe you'll see me on there. I also write for Buffalo Bills SI. I do a post-game recap and the occasional article throughout the week here and there. I've written about Sean McDermott and how great he is, and I wrote about the Amari Cooper trade when that happened initially. So there's some things here and there that I sprinkle in throughout between recaps. And me and Uber Hansen also do a show on Monday nights at 7 p.m. called the Cover One Roundup. It is a grand old time that gets very chaotic and very random and a little all over the place. So if you're into that sort of thing, while also being into football and all that sort of fun stuff, have at it. And especially this week, this past week, we did a whole segment called True or Rubbish, which is very long and entirely Thanksgiving based. So if you're looking
Oh,
for
okay.
Thanksgiving hot takes, that's the last like 20 to 30 minutes of the
You
show
brought
are
'em.
for you.
All
Oh
right.
yeah.
My
I
hottest
was
take,
ready.
people hate it. One, Thanksgiving is part of the holiday season. I don't skip it.
Correct.
People are like, oh, you skip over for Christmas. No, I don't. It's part of the
No.
holiday season.
Yeah.
Two, turkey's a low end protein for a main dish. It's okay. It's fine. But let's pump the brakes on
We did
turkey being
discuss
available.
that for the record. That was
Okay.
like the very first thing we discussed. So
All
hey,
right.
if you want to throw it out there, just saying.
I'm gonna have to get in on that one. Real quick here before we get out of here, I do want people to know the best way. I hear it all the time. How can we support the network? One, like, subscribe. That's easy. That's free. Toss us likes. Give us subscriptions on all your podcast platforms, YouTube, social media. Like all of our followers. Follow everybody. All those stuff's free. Doesn't cost you anything. But if you want to do it in a monetary way, join us on our Cover One Pass. It's a great membership where you can get in on our Discord. You get content. Eric did a great self-scouting thing, and he posted some of it to social media, but he gave most of it to Discord. He didn't give all of what he saw on the self-scouting. It was in the Discord channel. It's going right now. Like, people are talking all the time. We'll get off the show. It'll be hot. It'll be active. And keep an eye out I'm pretty sure we are going to be running a Black Friday special here after Thanksgiving. So keep an eye out for that. If you want to get in on the One Pass membership, now's going to be the time to do it. We don't discount that price too often, but we are going to be running, I think, a Black Friday special. Don't hold me to it if it doesn't happen, but I'm pretty sure we are working behind the scenes to make that happen. So definitely give us that support. Join the Discord. It's totally worth it. If you're a football fan, you like this kind of content, you like the film room, that's where you have access to the creators, to the community. Other than that, on behalf of myself, my handsome guest, David Faux, and our producer, Chris Kepner, this has been Cover One Buffalo, powered by BetUS and sponsored by William Mattar Law Offices. And we are out.